You are listening to MCC GeoPod, the geopolitical podcast of the Mathias Corvinus Collegium, the largest talent management institute in Hungary. If you want to know more about our mission, please look up our English website at mcc.hu/en or check out our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter channels. For interesting articles and analysis of our professors and students, look up our knowledge base at corvinus.hu/en.
Welcome everyone at the new GeoPod session where my guest is Mr. Misa Djurkovic, who is the head of the MKI MCC Center for Geopolitics. Welcome.
Thank you very much for inviting me or accepting me here as a guest, and I hope that this will be interesting for our listeners.
Hopefully, and welcome from my part. I'm Klementina Kozma, also a research fellow of the MCC-MKI Center for Geopolitics. Today we will talk about the Valdai meeting, or this huge conference where Misa, as far as I know, was an attendant. And I want to ask about your experience. What is this Valdai Forum about? What is the purpose? Who are the attendees? And what is the main aim?
Well, in a way, this is really one of the most, if I could say, prestigious and interesting discussion clubs or the conferences that are happening in the world. Actually, this was 22nd meeting, the big meeting. Actually, the Valdai Club is expert, big, very important Russian club that started 22 years ago. And it's operating, of course, during the whole year. You can go and check their website, which is very interesting. They have like regular, smaller panels, conferences that are being held in Moscow or other parts of Russia. But the main event is this annual big conference that has been happening like for 22 years as well. It's been evolving and so on. And this year, it was the biggest one for the time being. Somewhere about 140 people from around the world and Russia, of course, were invited and were guests. Allegedly, I heard some rumors around that the whole thing is worth about 1 million of euros. And it's really fantastically professionally organized. And it is happening in the mountain resort, which is called Krasnaya Polyana, or the Red Mountain, or Red Pot, or whatever, and which is above Sochi. Sochi, very famous, nice city, and so on. So this was, I had the chance to be there for the second time. This was my second big Valdai, and of course I have to emphasize that there I use my Serbian affiliation, Institute of European Studies, which I'm still connected, because as we all know, Europe is also still pursuing this kind of academic sanctions, so I could not use my MCC.
Sure.
And we were respecting the orders in that sense.
And as far as I know, you wrote a report about this meeting, and you mentioned some of the panels which were the most interesting from your point of view. Could you explain some of them? What were the main topics?
Yes. It's lasting for 4 days, actually, very hard work. And everyone, of course, is focused internationally on the last day when the big guy, Vladimir Vladimirovich, the president of Russia, is coming. And he's having discussion with the panelists that goes for 4 hours. Actually, this year it was also, he starts with a small introduction lecture. Then Fyodor Lukyanov, who is heading all of that, is debating with him. And then people could ask a question and so on. Beside that, it's traditionally also the possibility to speak with Lavrov, with Minister of Foreign Affairs, and two quite an interesting and influential parts of the administration. One is Alexander Novak, who is deputy of the prime minister and who could give you all the data about state of Russian economy and so on. And quite an interesting guy who is perceived as a big prospect for the future of Russia, called Maxim Oreshkin, who is, I think, now at the position of the deputy of the head of administration. But he's a very interesting field worker. He can give you quite a lot of overview and so on. Beside that, actually, that's happening usually for the last 1.5 days. Beside that, there are also 9 to 11 panels, including some special sessions. This year, the first introductory one was about the report which the guys from program directors and other guys from Valdai have prepared, which is extremely interesting. And I would recommend your listeners first to go to the website of the Valdai Club, and they can freely download it. The report is called Dr. Chaos, or How to Stop Worrying and Get in Love with Disorder, or something like that, which is, of course, reminding us to the famous movie of Kubrick, like Dr. Strangelove and Nuclear Bomb and so on. And that was used for the first session with some very interesting guests from around the world who were giving their comments and so on and so on. And also there was a special session on the role of leaders or leadership in the world. As we all know, that's the old debate about, especially that was interesting during the communist and Marxist times, when they insisted actually that we have, economic and material forces going around and everything else is just coming out. On the other hand, the whole history of the theory of elite and leadership is insisting that actually one person could change quite a lot of things, and connected with Trump and with big leaders like Xi Jinping and so on. Of course, that was interesting to debate again. And in the meantime, there were also 9 other regular panels, which were dealing, like 2 of them with artificial intelligence, of course, and that was really fantastic to see again. Arvind Gupta, which is leading Indian expert for that, he gave overview, including the things that are already called geopolitics of the artificial intelligence and so on. Also, Russian guys from Skolkovo is their center and so on. Also, there was a very good panel on economic development problems, de-dollarization, what is happening there, like Paulo Nogueira Batista, this famous banker from Brazil, was there. He gave some fantastic overview about what's happening with the currency in the world and so on. And there was a panel on immigration as well, but I honestly didn't like it, and some people were dissatisfied because it was very mostly people from the left who were complaining that everyone is protecting and so on, which is a pity because there were also people from the right, so we could have made very, strong debate and so on. And of course, the things that were dominating are connected with the multipolarity, with the general transformation of the world, where are we heading to. And my favorite panel, maybe we could speak a little bit about that, was about the transformation of the war, actually, in practical sense, that is happening today.
That's a very interesting topic. But before we go to that one, as far as I understood, the whole meeting was about to discuss the world politics change and how, this is a kind of the change of political philosophy. How do we view the current system and how should we change it? And as far as I understand, it is mainly organized or ruled by Russia, this meeting, but were there any partners from the transatlantic region representing themselves?
Yes, of course. That was people should know that actually some maybe haven't heard about that, but until 22, regularly there were coming quite well-known international scholars also. John Mearsheimer was there several times, and you could even check some of his quite well-known speeches delivered at the Valdai that are present at YouTube there. Of course, after the direct confrontation in 22 started, in which Russia was not fighting against the Ukraine, but mostly against NATO countries in a broader other sense, actually, especially Brussels today is playing a very important role as the last pillar of the fight against the strong Russia. Well, so of course, Westerners hesitated to go there. But still, even last year, Glenn Deason was present there. Also this year, whom we know actually in Norwegian with a very interesting podcast and very good IR scholar, Richard Sakwa, a very famous expert for Kent University, who actually had small affair last year because it came out that Grey Zone. I had a chance to speak with him that he was actually object of the monitoring from the services of Britain. At one point, he was not allowed to enter with his electronic passport and so on. Anyway, but it settled down and he was present again. Then Marco Carnelos, fantastic Italian guy who was special advisor to 3 prime ministers in Italy, and Americans above all started to return. Jennifer Kavanaugh and Mark Episcopus were online, and Peter Sleskin and Anatol Lieven from Quincy Center were with us, actually. So in the sense, you could see that especially Americans and Trump Americans are starting slowly to, again, build the bridges to debate about things which people agree, disagree, and so on and so on. So in that sense, we also had there are some people from Germany. There was one gentleman from Hungary, Gabor Stier. So you could see people from Western world and so on. But of course, now since Russia, since 22 has been turning towards so-called global South, there were 10 Indians, 10 Chinese. There were people from Latin America, from Africa, from Islam countries and Islamic countries. And so that was really fantastic possibility to even speak with the guys, especially guys from Turkey, Iran. Daniel Levin was also online, so it was interesting to see this perception about Middle East, what's happening. So in that sense, for me as a scholar, it was really utmost opportunity, and of course the privilege that I had the chance again to speak at the panel, which was dedicated to manipulation and the fate of democracy and so on. So it was also very, very interesting.
So, yeah, it's a long time question. What is the future of democracies? Is there a future anyway?
At
or
all.
what type of future could they have? But since we in the transatlantic region define ourselves as non-belligerent nations, but still we have wars and fights. So what was that main panel or that panel about the change of modern war?
Yeah. Actually, I already had a chance, what was that, March this year in Belgrade. I co-organized the visit of the guy whose name is Ruslan Puhov, and who is very interesting expert for the military industry, exactly these issues about technology, about how war is going on, and so on. And he's leading some center, which is probably the best they have that. And generally, I think one of the most interesting places in the world to follow about these issues. And the center is called Center for the Analysis of the Strategy and Technology. And for the last 5 years, they publish some fantastic reports. They're having their journals, of course, and so on. I got some of that. But they publish just slowly a couple of the books that might be interesting. One is, for example, published last year. It's called Turecki Marshrut, which means like the pathway over Turkey. And it's in detail analyzing transformation of contemporary Turkish military structure, what is happening with that in the world, what are the projections of the Turkey, what are their capacities for waging the war, projecting the power, and so on. Extremely interesting, unfortunately only Russian for the time being, but it might be useful for people. Then there was, I got it even before that, analysis, the collection of work dealing with the urban warfare. It's called Between the Rocks and Between the Houses and something like that. And it's analyzing the experiences of the urban warfare from wars in former Yugoslavia, like Vukovar and so on, which was very famous or notorious, then up to Syria, Ukraine, and so on. In that sense, yeah, please.
Yes, it changes the technological background as well, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that was very interesting, because actually it's probably urban warfare today is the last possibility that you can get face to face with your opponent. It has changed completely. At the open field, you don't see one, because drones have completely taken and transformed what you can do, like, and so on. For example, at this panel, I also made a question about how Russia succeeded to transform its traditional military strategy, which was based, as we all know, for the last 8 years on big tank and massive forces going around. So no, it's not allowed. Now, Pukhov already spoke about that you have to have a maximum 2 to 3 people in the group, otherwise you will get the drone and completely erase everything. So in that sense, they also published this, we presented this Pukhov's book about Ukraine. It's called Ukraine or something like in the Ukraine or whatsoever, and which is analyzing everything that is going in the field, transformation of technology, introduction of the different, how systems like HIMARS or Kinjal or have been shown. That's an extremely interesting book, and it was just published recently, the second issue. So at the panel, there were 2 guys that are cooperating in this center, Maxim Shapovalenko and Vasily Kashin, who is also from the High School of Economy there. Jennifer Kavanagh was there. Indian General Sharma was included. And we got 5 fantastic persons there speaking about what is happening with the war. And just to summarize that, on my question, like how they transformed, Vasily Kashin said, not only that we have to change that immediately, but now the things that are happening at the field are forcing us and the other side and everyone who is following that to change strategy and technology literally within every 2 months. That so many new things have happened. So in that sense, even in ReArm document that EU published this year, if you remember, they used the term, an idiom, which says that Ukraine is a laboratory. In that sense, everyone in the world connected with military issues is following that as a big laboratory and tries to get all the possible data and so on. Also, just to mention this part, which is briefly discussed in that, but in the journals, I had the guy called Grigory Zerkin wrote a fantastic article about Ukrainian razvedka, as they say, special services. What are they doing? How they are transforming? How they are implementing this, as they call, terrorist acts within Russia, including this inclusion of the drones who attacked airports, killing of the especially how should I say, as they call it, passionario, the passionate people who were mobilizing public opinion, like Daria Dugina, this military blogger Voldan Tatarsky, and some of the generals. So it's many of the new systems that are being used in the warfare, in the elimination, and so on and so on. So of course, people were touching upon Middle East, that is also showing quite a new stuff. But in that sense, I think that most of the people are really interested in what is happening in the military field, because there is general perception that we might be facing a lot of new regional conflicts, wars, and that even some global confrontation is not excluded.
So what do they mean that this global confrontation is not excluded? Does it mean that now great powers are testing their modern and more modern and the newest weapon systems until at a final point they decide that, okay, I will use this super modern technology against my greatest enemies? Does it mean it?
In a way, yes, as a possibility. So actually, the report that I mentioned is speaking about that there is definitely no unipolar hegemony as it is pursued. Then again, that America is giving up of its universality and pretension to control every part of the world. Definitely, this what is happening with Trump is that and Hextech that they are returning to some of the borders that they think will be their possible control of the sphere of influence. Of course, they will be interested to follow what's happening outside, but generally trying to get out and not to project the power all around the whole world. Yeah, please.
Is it understood in the other parts of the world, other than the transatlantic region, that the United States are heading back, they are leaving the other parts of the world? Is it understood in that way that the rules which were created once, ruled by the United States or influenced by the United States and ideologies coming from the United States, are now over? And in a system of multipolarity, now the other players of the system will create new rules?
Yeah, the point is that there are no rules at this moment, actually, but you rightly define what is the position of Trump in a way and what is strongly supported by Russians, China, and other guys. So the idea is exactly this. First, so-called global universal institutions are really slowly becoming totally senseless and useless. Nobody really thinks that United Nations or Security Council can do anything. Institutions like World Health Organization are totally losing their legitimacy. They are being treated from both sides, as you can see, also Trump, but other parts of the world, as an instrument of Pfizer and other multinational corporations. Then Iranians decided to expel this international agency for nuclear, how do they call it, control and so on, because they were literally using their possibility to inspect facilities to give it as a spying material to the America and so on. So in that sense, generally, Peter Sleskin, when he was asked about what's happening with these global institutions that were created after Second World War as, in a way, part of Western and American hegemony, he said, yeah, you're right. They were made as a part of American hegemony. We don't need them anymore because we don't pretend to have complete hegemony over the world. We are prepared for multipolar world, but so we can give them to Chinese if they want to take it. And it was very, of course, people were laughing and so on. Generally, that was very, very good atmosphere. Another thing is, of course, that idea of the global governance, which was meant to be, how should I say, fake universality, projecting again American rules globally and so on. It has completely given up. So it's exactly the thing that we are coming into some global disorder, and there are no global rules at the time. We are heading out of something, but still we don't know what it's going to be. So in that sense, there will be a lot of conflicts, especially regional one, proxy conflicts and so on. But on the other hand, as they say in this report, it is really opening possibility that we might even finish within some global confrontation somehow. But it doesn't mean to be like that. So we are entering into some let me say multipolarity, which is danger in a way, but nobody's really how should I say afraid of that, and the rest of the world apart from transatlantic cooperation is actually very happy with that, because there are some new possibilities and so on. So we can say that we are heading towards some transitional phases in which still there are a lot of possibilities for economic cooperation, for exchange, and so on. We'll see what's gonna eventually come out of Trump's tariffs. It seems that they are kind of giving up of something, and so because the other parts of the world have their own strength and so on. But anyway, That's what report says. Instead of worrying about disorder, learn to love it and to explore the new possibilities that it is opening. And what is also being emphasized by all sides, including Americans, that Brussels at this moment is probably the biggest problem for the world, because the Brussels is the last place, and when I said Brussels, it's EU and parts of the NATO, if I could say, connected with that. Those are the last pillars of the world that still want to do this very dangerous stuff, and that is to project its international perception of the world based on ideology. Americans have given up on ideology. Now ideology, and for everyone else, is not playing according to the ideas of Kissinger. There other people are trying, for Chinese, for Russia, for Africa, for Latin America. Ideology, international relations is something which is unacceptable. They all accept to cooperate with countries that have completely different ideology. Brussels is the last fundamentalistic place, and it's being perceived as a potential problem for the world.
There is a Hungarian proverb that it's better to be afraid than be surprised.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't vision too many good things for us, for Europeans, because it means the other parts of the world sees another way how things should go. At least now the United States and the leadership, the current leadership, the Trump administration sees in this way. But traditionally, the Americans were on that side, as which side Brussels is in the current moment. Anyway, sooner or later, Europe should accept that there is a transition in the world. But until we reach the point of we are now transit into the real multipolarity where the rules are set, we are in chaos, right? That's what
Yes.
was the meeting's main point, that we should start to learn how to survive in the chaos.
Yeah. How to adapt to the chaos.
Yes, but should we adapt to the chaos, or should we, how can states adapt first to chaos? Because it's the state of uncertainty and without any rules. And humanity learned in 2 world wars that a world without rules leads us to great destructions. And as you mentioned, that there might be scenarios in this chaos, and it depends on us. On humans and leaders.
So yes, we have the horrible experience of 20th century, of course, but we also have 19th century, in which we also haven't had hegemony, and we had classical concept of power in Europe, in which people were respecting the rules. There were small-scale wars, but still 19th century was, without hegemony, was treated as a very peaceful and prosperous part of the global history. Of course, Chinese were not so happy in this time. This is the big news, that the other parts of the world are really returning to the world stage. And some people say they actually perceive, speaking about the position of Europe, that what was really going on for the last couple of 100 years, and this is that Europe, which is actually globally very small part of the world, was controlling the whole world, and that it had so much economic power and so much big production and influence in the world. Actually, generally, when you take a look about the economic history of the world and international history of the world, you see that it is a hubris. That's just, people say, small part of the history. And especially Chinese are very happy that things are returning to the data which used to be before 200 years ago. So in that sense, also for Europe, it's going to be, when I say Europe, basically it's European Union nowadays, to accept that its influence is reducing to its, if I could say, real economic and other kind of measure. And speaking about the possible screenplays, scenarios, and how rules can function somehow. I could give you one example which is very interesting, and this is international order at the seas and oceans, actually. Yeah, you don't have a strict right or rules. That was very interesting. There's a famous book of Carl Schmitt, Moderator, about the history of the international law at the seas, actually, because it started, as we all know, in the 15th, 16th century, when the Pope decided that, this part will be Hispanic and the other will be Portuguese, and that was settled. But then the other players were starting to come, like Britain, of course, and Dutch, and after that Americans. And so I said, well, we don't accept that. Of course, it also took some time with the transition. As we all know, British were using the pirates even to challenge Spanish Armada at the sea and so. But eventually, we came to the 20th century, in which today you don't have one hegemon there, you don't have strict, defined legal rules around, but still the whole normal world, apart from piracy, which comes from time to time into Somalia, into Hormuz and so on, you could see that big powers and the rest of the world could actually cooperate, define some rules, and make the things happen there and function, which really gives prosperity to all of us. So in that sense, we could finish, for example, saying with a good hope that this system that has been implemented and still working and giving prosperity to the whole world and some kind of security is possible even in the different spheres. Of course, there are problems in the Middle East. There will probably always be. It's, as we all know, big question within USA proper, how to deal with that. This is this very strong internal debate, how to deal with Israel. These are very specific relationship between Bibi Netanyahu and Trump and so on. But then again, the war is going on in Ukraine, and we hope that eventually these initiatives between Trump and Putin will give some fruit at the end. But I think that there is capacity really for the world to make a control of these big permanent or temporary problems that are happening, and that we could, even if we are facing the world in transition, pass without some major global fights using nuclear weapon, which is, of course, the biggest threat that people are happening. And that could also give maybe chance to smaller people, nations like Hungary or like Serbia, or people to find more space to somehow pass over, to survive, to cooperate globally, and so on. And of course, as I said, the biggest problem is this ideological pressure that we are seeing, for example, from the Brussels that is against the Hungary. This is a very good example. But I see hope, if I could say, and to finish with that.
Thank you very much. That sounds very interesting, and hopefully we will still have hope and we can manage without a planetary or global war. Thank you very much.
Inshallah, let me say in the future European language, if I can show a little bit. Thank you very much for inviting me, and it was very nice speaking to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to this MCC GeoPod episode. For further media content, please look up our English website at mcc.hu/en, or look for us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you want to read more by our professors and students, check out our knowledge base at corvinus.hu/en.